The night was quiet on Earth, a small village resting under the vast sky. Stars twinkled above, and a cold breeze rustled through the trees. A young boy, no more than 7 years old, lay asleep in his bed, unaware that his life was about to change forever. The Exolari had been watching Earth for months, studying its people from the shadows. To them, humans were nothing more than another primitive species unaware of the greater galaxy, weak in comparison to the mighty empires that ruled the stars. They had taken beings from countless worlds before, using them for research, entertainment, or experimentation. No one had ever fought back. No one had ever come searching. Tonight, Earth would be no different, or so they believed. The Exolari ship hovered high above, hidden from human eyes. Its hull blended with the night, absorbing any radar signals that might expose it. A small team of aliens moved swiftly, their bodies covered in dark armor, their glowing yellow eyes locked on the target. With a silent command, they activated their technology, a shimmering portal forming in the boy's room. The air crackled for a moment, and then with a faint hum, the child vanished, his bed now empty. The room remained untouched, the blankets still warm where he had been moments ago. The operation had taken less than 10 seconds. The Exolari were efficient, precise. They left no trace, no evidence. The humans would never know what had happened. Inside the alien ship, the child awoke with a gasp, his small heart pounding in his chest. Cold metal surrounded him, the air thick with an unfamiliar scent. The walls pulsed with dim blue light, casting eerie shadows on the strange figures around him. Fear gripped him, but he did not scream. His eyes darted across the room, taking in the sight of tall, slender creatures with sharp fingers and reptilian features. They spoke in a language he couldn't understand, their voices a mixture of clicks and hisses. One of them, larger than the rest, bent down, inspecting him as if he were nothing more than an object. The boy shrank back, pressing himself against the cold surface behind him, his breath coming in short, shaky gasps. The Exolari did not understand human emotions. To them, fear was a weakness. This child was no different from the hundreds of others they had taken before. He would be studied, tested, then either disposed of or sold to the highest bidder. His fate was already sealed, his existence reduced to nothing more than another data point in their records. The lead scientist made a note in his tablet, barely acknowledging the boy's presence. A small creature like this would not last long in the harsh conditions of the Exolari laboratories. Still, protocol had to be followed. They would begin with basic tests, measure his endurance, analyze his biology, and then determine his value. The boy's hands clenched into fists as he struggled to make sense of what was happening. He wanted to cry, to call for his parents, but deep inside, something told him it wouldn't help. He had to stay quiet, had to stay alert. He watched the aliens closely, noting the way they moved, the way their long fingers tapped on strange glowing screens. He did not understand their words, but he understood one thing: he was not safe here. His mind raced, trying to remember how he had gotten here, but all he could recall was the darkness swallowing him. I in the control room of the ship. A Exolari officer reviewed the mission logs. Everything had gone as planned. The humans had no advanced technology, no planetary defenses worth mentioning. Their primitive weapons were laughable compared to the power of the Exolari fleet. Even if someone noticed the child's disappearance, what could they do? Nothing. They were powerless. Satisfied, the officers sent a transmission back to their command center. The message was simple: another specimen secured. No resistance encountered. But what the Exolari did not know, what they had failed to consider, was that humans were not like other species. They did not simply accept loss. They did not ignore the disappearance of their own. They searched. They investigated. And when they found those responsible, they did not forget. They did not forgive. The Exolari believed they had stolen just another insignificant being from a primitive world, but in reality, they had just made the gravest mistake in their empire's history. Because when humans are pushed, they do not run. They do not beg. They fight. And Earth was already watching the stars. The morning sun rose over the quiet town, its golden light stretching over rooftops and empty streets. It was supposed to be an ordinary day, But something was wrong. A mother stood in her child's bedroom, her hands trembling as she stared at the empty bed. The covers were still slightly wrinkled, the pillow still warm, but her son was gone. Panic clawed at her chest as she searched the house, calling his name over and over again, her voice rising with each unanswered call. The front door was locked, the windows untouched. There was no sign of a struggle, no broken glass, no footprints leading outside. It was as if he had simply vanished into thin air. The police arrived within the hour. Officers moved through the house, asking questions, looking for clues, but there was nothing to find. No witnesses. No explanations. No logical reason for a child to disappear without a trace. The entire town soon joined the search, combing through forests, knocking on doors, checking security cameras, but there was nothing. It made no sense. People don't just disappear. Families don't just lose their children overnight. But Earth was not just any world, and humans were not just any species. They did not let go. They did not forget. Across the planet, a hidden network of scientists and military officials monitored unusual events. Some worked for governments, others for secret organizations, watching the stars for signs of extraterrestrial life. When the reports of the missing child surfaced, something about the case set off alarms. It wasn't just another tragic disappearance, it fit a pattern. Similar cases had been recorded before, strange disappearances in isolated areas where no explanation was ever found. But this time, there was one crucial difference. This time, the world was watching. High above Earth, satellites operated by military agencies detected an anomaly. A brief, unnatural energy surge in the atmosphere, lasting only a fraction of a second, like a ripple in space itself. It was dismissed as an error at first until someone checked the coordinates. The surge had occurred directly above the child's home at the exact moment of his disappearance. That was no coincidence. It was a signature. A footprint of something that should not be there. Within hours, classified files were opened, old theories dusted off. If this was an abduction, it was not a human one. And if something had taken a child from Earth, then humanity had only one response. They would find them. The world's most powerful organizations moved in silence. Governments, military leaders, intelligence agencies, each one receiving encrypted messages with the same urgent command. The investigation went beyond the town, beyond the country. Data was gathered from every possible source: satellite records, radio signals, energy anomalies. Deep in hidden research facilities, top minds worked without rest, piecing together the evidence. The missing child was not just another case. This was a test. A warning. And humanity never ignored a warning. I and the dark void of space, far beyond human reach, the XLR ship drifted, unaware of the chaos it had caused. The abductors had already moved on, preparing for their next mission, confident that the small, primitive planet would never notice. To them, the child was a meaningless specimen, his fate unimportant. They had done this to hundreds of other species before. No one had ever come looking. No one had ever fought back. But they had never taken from Earth before. Back on the planet, scientists cracked the anomaly's energy signature. It was not natural. It was artificial and advanced teleportation technology far beyond anything humans had built. But knowing how it worked was not enough. They needed more. They needed to track it. Every resource was thrown into the effort, scanning the far reaches of the atmosphere, looking for any sign of a ship, any sign of a trail left behind. Time was running out. And then, a breakthrough. A faint signal so small, so well hidden, it almost went unnoticed. But humans were persistent. They sharpened the search, refining their scans, adjusting their methods. The signal was moving, heading toward deep space. It was almost impossible to track, but it was there. The pieces started falling into place. Someone had taken the child, and now, for the first time in history, humanity knew exactly where to look. The leaders of Earth made their decision. Silence was no longer an option. Within secret military bases, warships hidden from the public, built in preparation for the day humanity would no longer be alone, powered up for the first time. Pilots were briefed, soldiers armed, orders given. They were not going on a rescue mission. They were going to make a statement. No1 takes from humanity and walks away. And as the first human fleet prepared to leave Earth's atmosphere, the XLR remained blissfully unaware of the storm that was coming for them. Deep in the endless black of space, the XLR ship drifted through the void, its sleek metallic hull reflecting the distant light of stars. Inside, the atmosphere was calm, sterile, and filled with the quiet hum of advanced machinery. The XLR officers moved through the corridors without urgency, unaware of the unseen eyes now watching them. They had completed their mission, securing yet another specimen from yet another primitive world, and their records showed nothing unusual. Their empire had done this for centuries. No species had ever resisted. No one had ever dared to challenge them. To the XLR, the galaxy belonged to those with power, and Earth had seemed like just another nameless planet, filled with creatures too weak to matter. But what the XLR failed to understand, what they had never even considered, was that they had taken from a species unlike any they had encountered before. Humanity was not like the others. Humans did not simply mourn. They did not forget. They hunted. They adapted. And when they finally struck, it would not be in anger or desperation, it would be with cold, calculated precision. The storm had already begun, and the XLR, in their arrogance, had yet to hear the first rumble of thunder. Far from the XLR vessel, on the edges of known space, the first human warships emerged from the void. Their hulls, dark and built for war, absorbed the surrounding light, making them almost invisible against the backdrop of space. There were no signals, no messages, no warnings. Humanity had not come to negotiate. They had come to end this before it could ever happen again. Aboard the lead warship, Earth's finest strategists and commanders stood in silence, their eyes locked on the distant alien vessel. They had studied the enemy, analyzed every possible scenario. This was not a battle for survival. This was a message, one that would be delivered in fire and steel. The child, locked away in a containment cell deep within the XLR ship, had stopped crying days ago. He had learned that tears would not change his fate. The strange creatures that had taken him barely acknowledged his presence, their glowing yellow eyes cold and unfeeling. They had spoken in an alien tongue, made notes on glowing screens, but never once had they shown him kindness. He did not understand their words, but he understood their intent. He was an experiment, a thing to be studied, and when they were finished with him, they would discard him as if he had never existed. But the child had not given up hope. He had seen something in the eyes of the humans who raised him, something the XLR could never understand: determination. The XLR ship continued its journey, unaware that its fate had already been sealed. The humans had tracked them, not with superior technology, but with something far deadlier: relentless will. Their scientists had broken the XLR's teleportation signature, followed the faint energy trail that no other species had ever thought to trace. Every step the XLR had taken had been recorded, analyzed, predicted. By the time the XLR realized they were being hunted, it would be far too late. In the dark void, the silent human fleet advanced, their weapons primed, their systems locked onto the target. They had disabled all outgoing transmissions from the XLR ship before the enemy could even realize they were not alone. The XLR, for all their advanced technology, had never fought an enemy that adapted faster than they did. Humanity had learned from history. Wars were not won through strength alone. They were won through precision, through understanding the enemy before the enemy even knew a battle had begun. Inside the XLR ship, alarms finally blared, but it was already too late. The first strike was not an explosion, not a barrage of lasers, but something far more terrifying: complete silence. The ship's power flickered, its systems failing one by one. The lights dimmed, the artificial gravity wavered, and the alien crew scrambled in confusion. Their communications had been severed. Their engines were shutting down. Panic rippled through the ranks. For the first time, the XLR felt something they had never known before: fear. Then, without warning, the ship trembled as metallic claws latched onto its surface. The XLR barely had time to react before their security doors were breached. The humans had arrived. The invaders did not announce themselves with words. They did not hesitate. They moved like ghosts through the corridors, their weapons swift and precise, their presence overwhelming. The Exilari guards, trained for lesser enemies, were cut down before they could even raise their weapons. The humans did not waste time. They had one mission, one goal: to retrieve what was theirs and send a message that the galaxy would never forget. The child sat in his cell, his small fingers gripping the cold metal walls, his breath shallow as the ship shook around him. He could hear distant sounds, shouts, footsteps, something heavy hitting the floor. Then, suddenly, the door to his cell hissed open. A figure stood in the doorway, clad in dark armor, a visor covering their face. For a moment, the child was frozen, unsure whether to run or hide. But then, the soldier kneeled, reaching out a gloved hand. "We're taking you home." The child did not hesitate. He grabbed the hand and was lifted into strong arms, carried swiftly through the chaos. Around him, the Exilari fell one by one, their ship now a battlefield. The humans did not stop to celebrate their victory. They had no interest in conquest, no need for revenge. They had come for one reason, and one reason only: to bring back what was theirs. As the human warships turned away, their mission complete, they left behind only destruction and silence. The Exilari had learned a lesson that would haunt them for generations. They had believed themselves to be the masters of the galaxy, untouchable, unstoppable. But they had made a mistake. They had taken from humanity, and humanity never forgets. The people of Earth did not know it yet, but their world was on the edge of something terrible. The sky was still blue, the cities still busy with life, and the air still carried the sounds of laughter, engines, and conversations. But high above them, beyond their reach, something was coming. Something silent, something unseen. It moved through the vastness of space, cold and calculating, like a shadow creeping closer with each passing second. The Exilari Empire had made its decision. The humans had defied them. They had fought back. And now, the consequences would follow. It had started with a single mistake. The Exilari had taken a human child, believing Earth to be weak, just another primitive world too blind to notice. But humans had noticed. They had not cowered. They had not begged. They had followed, hunted, and in the dark void of space, they had struck back with ruthless precision. The Exilari had never faced an enemy like them before, an enemy that did not just react but learned. They had underestimated humanity once, but they would not make that mistake again. No, this time, the lesson would be burned into the bones of Earth itself. The fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system, massive warships gliding like silent gods of destruction. Their hulls were sleek, their weapons charged with energy strong enough to turn entire cities into dust. They had come not for war, but for demonstration. The humans needed to understand who ruled the stars. The message would be simple, final, and undeniable: submit or be erased. On Earth, the first sign came in the form of disrupted satellites. Scientists monitoring space stations reported strange interference, signals being blocked, transmissions failing without explanation. Military radars detected objects moving in deep space, but the readings made no sense. There were no official reports of incoming ships, no friendly vessels in the sector. Whatever was approaching, it was not human. Governments scrambled, intelligence agencies worked around the clock, and within hours, the highest-ranking leaders of Earth sat in hidden bunkers, their screens filled with data they did not want to believe. But belief was no longer a choice. In the skies above, something impossible happened. The moon, so familiar, so unchanging, was suddenly cast into shadow, as if something enormous had moved between it and the Earth. And then, as millions of people looked up, the night sky darkened in a way it never had before. Stars disappeared, swallowed by something vast, something unseen by the naked eye. Fear gripped the planet as scientists, news channels, and ordinary people all came to the same realization at once. There was something above them. Something big. The illusion did not last long. The Exilari ships had hidden themselves well, cloaked in advanced technology, but when they wanted to be seen, there was no mistaking their presence. One by one, They revealed themselves massive warships descending like silent titans from the heavens. Their hulls gleamed with the cold shine of alien metal, their weapons humming with quiet menace. Cities fell into stunned silence as the sky filled with ships, hundreds of them, enough to blot out the sun. And then the voice came. It did not come from radios or screens. It came from everywhere, transmitted directly into the minds of every living human, a deep, emotionless presence that echoed through the very air. Humans of Earth, you have made a mistake. The words froze people in place. Some screamed, some dropped to their knees, others simply stood, unable to comprehend the sheer power behind the voice. This was no mere invasion. This was something else, something beyond their understanding. You have taken what is not yours, the voice continued, cold and final. You have defied the order of the galaxy. There is only one path left to you. Surrender and live. Resist and be erased. The world seemed to hold its breath. Every soldier, every leader, every human with a beating heart understood what was happening. This was not a threat. This was a choice. And it was a choice that had only one acceptable answer in the eyes of their enemy. But humanity had never been good at following rules. Deep in hidden military bases, in underground bunkers and classified war rooms, decisions were made. Earth had prepared for this moment. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Enough to fight. Enough to show the Exilari that humanity was not just another species waiting to be conquered. The Exilari thought fear would be enough. They believed their presence alone would be enough to break Earth's spirit. They were wrong. The response was not one of surrender. It was not hesitation, nor was it diplomacy. It was silence. A deep, calculating silence. The humans did not answer right away. They let the weight of the moment stretch, let the Exilari believe they had already won. And then, as the alien fleet loomed above, something happened that no Exilari commander had expected. The first missile launched. It was not the largest, not the strongest, not the most advanced weapon humanity had ever created. But it was the first. A single spark of defiance cutting through the sky, aimed directly at the nearest Exilari warship. The silence broke. The illusion shattered. And just like that, the battle for Earth had begun. The Exilari had come expecting surrender. Instead, they found war. A war unlike any they had ever fought. For the first time in their long history, they faced an enemy that would not bow, would not break, and would never forget what had been done to them. And as explosions tore through the sky, lighting up the darkness, the Exilari finally understood the mistake they had made. They had given humanity a reason to fight. And humanity would not stop until the sky was theirs again. The sky was burning. Explosions lit up the darkness like brief, violent stars, and the world below trembled as the battle began. The Exilari had come with their demands, expecting submission, expecting fear. But humanity had answered not with surrender, not with words, but with fire. The first missile had been the beginning, a single defiant strike against the impossible odds. And now, all across the planet, Earth's forces were awakening. Hidden launch sites erupted with energy as defense systems that had never been tested in true war finally activated. Fighter jets roared through the air, their pilots locking onto targets that had never been seen before in human history. Underground bunkers came to life with the sound of commands, orders given in voices that remained steady despite the chaos. Humanity was not kneeling. Humanity was fighting. The Exilari fleet had expected no resistance. Their warships, massive and ancient, had conquered countless worlds with a single appearance, their size alone enough to shatter the will of lesser species. But Earth was proving to be something different. Their technology was primitive in comparison, their weapons weaker, their ships slower, their armor thinner. And yet, they did not hesitate. The humans did not falter. They struck with everything they had, and for the first time in a long time, the Exilari found themselves in an unfamiliar situation. They were being challenged. The first human warships broke through the atmosphere, smaller than the Exilari dreadnoughts but faster, more agile. They weaved between enemy fire, launching torpedoes and missiles that slammed into the alien hulls. Some did nothing against the thick plating, but others found weaknesses, targeting engine vents, weapon ports, areas where even the mighty XLRE ships could bleed. One by one, smaller alien cruisers shuddered under the assault, their shields flickering, their formations breaking. The XLRE did not expect such coordinated aggression. Their battle doctrine was built around dominance, around fear. They had never fought against an enemy that did not fear them. On the ground, the war was just as brutal. Solari dropships descended from the sky, their forces spilling out into cities, expecting easy control. But the streets were not empty. Civilians had been evacuated, but in their place were soldiers, resistance fighters, men and women who had spent years preparing for the war they hoped would never come. Snipers hid on rooftops, rocket launchers were stationed in alleyways, and armored vehicles rolled through the streets like metal beasts. The XLRE, used to crushing lesser civilizations with overwhelming power, now found themselves ambushed at every turn. Their advanced weapons were powerful, but power meant nothing when their enemies attacked from the shadows, when every building, every ruined street, every burning vehicle became part of a battlefield they could not control. Deep in the heart of the battle, a single XLRE commander watched the chaos unfold from the bridge of his warship. His yellow eyes flickered with something he had not felt in centuries: unease. This was supposed to be simple. The humans should have broken by now. Any other species would have. They had the advantage in every way, and yet the battle was not over. It was only getting worse. He turned to his officers, demanding explanations, demanding results. But the reports that came in only made his unease grow. Their fleet was sustaining unexpected damage. Their forces on the ground were being isolated, cut off. The humans were adapting too quickly, countering every strategy, turning every disadvantage into an opportunity. This was not a species that submitted. This was a species that learned, that fought, that endured. And then the final strike came. Humanity had been fighting defensively, holding their ground, resisting. But now they changed tactics. The largest human warship, the Vengeance, pushed through the chaos of battle, charging straight toward the lead XLRE dreadnought. It should have been suicide. The XLRE vessel was larger, stronger, armed with weapons that could tear apart entire cities. But the Vengeance did not slow down. Its hull was scarred, its shields flickering, but it moved with purpose. And then, in the final moment, its engines flared to maximum power. It crashed directly into the enemy ship's central command tower. The explosion that followed was unlike anything seen before. Fire and metal erupted in all directions, a blast so powerful that it sent shockwaves through the entire battlefield. The XLRE dreadnought shuddered, its systems failing, its structure collapsing. The mighty warship, the symbol of Zalari supremacy, was dying. And as it fell, the entire XLRE fleet hesitated. That hesitation was all humanity needed. The surviving human forces surged forward with renewed fury, striking harder, pushing deeper. The XLRE, now leaderless, found themselves unprepared for this level of resistance. They had come to conquer. Now they were struggling to survive. Their warships, once untouchable, were being forced back, their formations collapsing. One by one, they started to retreat, realizing too late that this was not a battle they could win. As the sky cleared, as the last enemy ships fled into the void, humanity stood victorious. Their cities were scarred, their losses heavy, but they had won. They had answered the XLRE's demand for submission not with words, but with action. And the galaxy would never forget. For the first time, the XLRE Empire had tasted defeat. And for the first time, the universe had learned the truth about humanity. They were not just another species waiting to be conquered. They were something far more dangerous. They were survivors. And they never forgot those who tried to break them.